history on GGV, we started in 2000 in Silicon Valley and Singapore. In the first decade, we raised about $1 billion. The second decade, 2010 to 2020, really benefited from the rise of mobile internet, and our AUM increased to $9 billion, so the net increase of $8 billion. We had 18 IPOs in the last 18 months. Some of them include Slack, Peloton, Affirm, Airbnb. Those are some investments I'm involved with as well. I started investing with Bessemer Venture Partners here in Silicon Valley, and then moved to Asia in 2005 and came back to the Bay Area in 2013. While I was in Asia, I spent a lot of time in China, and I was early investor in Xiaomi. How many of you know Xiaomi? I invested from day one. It was a very expensive 20 million pre. Today it's over 60 billion in market cap. I also invested in another company called Meituan Dianping. Not sure how many of you know Meituan. It was expensive 180 million pre. Today it's 140 billion in market cap. Then I moved back in the Bay Area in 2013 because I thought that the lessons I saw in Asia are very relevant for outside of Asia in other emerging markets. So we started investing more in Southeast Asia, our roots in India and LatAm. And LatAm was 2018. And what prompted our interest in LatAm in 2018 was that Didi and SoftBank made investments in 99 at the end of 2017. And then they ended up acquiring the interest in 99 at the end of 2018. So we just thought the world is changing, and it's a market that we need to pay a lot of attention to. And then Snowden IPO, Nubank continued to grow, the landscape changed dramatically. And as you mentioned, with COVID, everything accelerated. So the digitization of offline economy has never got a bigger push. It's terrible. COVID is terrible, obviously, for many things in the world, many people. But it definitely accelerated adoption of digital technologies. And now when we started looking at LatAm in 2018, LatAm had 4 unicorns. There's over 30. And our friends at Atlantico did a great job with their reports the past 2 years and just detailed very clearly why now makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Hans. So when I invited you and I told you that this was going to be a conversation, so I really want for the people here to participate and ask questions to you. So I want to invite, where is Marcio? Marcio, please. Marcio Silva at JP Morgan has a question for you.
Hans, thanks for coming and joining us. I think that the main question is at what stage do you think we are in LatAm compared to Asia? Because obviously the development in Asia is great, and you're looking for this new development in LatAm, had all these companies. Where do you think we are in the next steps? How do you see the next 5 years?
When we look at, if I use Asia as a reference point, Asia is obviously different regions. Within Asia, China, e-commerce started to take off when GDP per capita was about 4,000. And then all the quick commerce, the grocery delivery started to take off when the GDP per capita was roughly about 9,000. And the smartphone penetration rate in China, when Alibaba, which GGV was an early investor in at 180 million pre, it was still in mostly desktop internet penetration. So the smartphone now is about 55% penetration, 60 in China, but in LatAm is much higher. And so GDP per capita of LatAm is, as a region, about 8,000 versus China's just under 10,000. And so it is higher GDP per capita than Southeast Asia, it's higher GDP per capita than India, and there's a higher smartphone penetration than the other 2 markets. So at the aggregate level, it's a great market for startups, and this is why you see Sea with Garena and Shopee expanding rapidly. And Mercado Libre is fantastic, and they're doing extremely well, but it's a market for multiple winners. So you're going to look at Sea, Shopee very aggressively continue to invest in the region, and you see a lot of local startups becoming bigger and bigger. So if you ask me, if I use timeline, it reminds me a lot of China maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. So the speed of change is rapid. And I talked to David Velez at Nubank. He was looking at comparing LatAm and Asia back in 2010, 11, 12. And back then, Korea, China just continually invest. And he couldn't find the same kind of caliber of founders back then, so he built his own. And so over the last 4 years, we also see the quality of the founders improve dramatically. It got more experience. So right now, it just reminds of China from 5, 6, 7 years ago, in which they're doing a very rapid phase of mobile internet penetration in China.
Great, thank you.
André Thiolier, partner at Foley & Lardner. Danielle, if you could help pass the mic.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I think I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Margarise said, so I'll have a two-part question if you allow me. The first one is, we saw a boom of fintechs in Brazil and in other countries in Latin America, so I'm interested to see your view of what sectors are exciting you right now in LatAm. And then two is how much of the actual social impact of what the company is doing in terms of equalizing wealth takes place in your decision-making process. Thank you.
Right. I think, again, using China as an example, for China to allow an environment where someone like Alibaba can emerge, there had to be a lot of manufacturing jobs that were sent to China. So after the Plaza Accord of 1985, you see the yen depreciate a lot. And then more manufacturing gets moved from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia to China over the next 20 years. And by the time that Ali started in 1997, 98, 99, in that time frame, there was already about almost 10 years of manufacturing jobs that created that base. And then when Alibaba started growing very fast in the second decade, you already had $100, $200 million jobs created in China because of manufacturing. So now with the U.S.-China being the tension it is one of the key indicators we do look at is how much manufacturing is being moved to LatAm and to India, to Southeast Asia, because that forms a stronger base of people with higher disposable income in order to grow. Short of that, having e-commerce marketplaces where you have more sellers selling goods and then be able to sell within the region, if you're not exporting outside the region, all helps to create more income. And so when we look at investments, we look at not only serving the top 20, 30%, because that's very easy, much easier to monetize. We're also looking at investments like StoryCard in Mexico that target to the bottom half of the pyramid, or at least the middle 50% uniform have credit cards to increase efficiency both as a consumer and also as a seller. So when we look at investments, whereas in Asia, like consumer investment have taken off because there's a higher GDP per capita back then to grow. Here in LatAm, we look at both consumer investments and SMB tech. And you mentioned fintech. Fintech is faster to get started because there's so much inefficiency that when you don't need to move physical goods, so it's the first one to get off. In China, because fintech was so highly regulated, e-commerce was the first one to take off because the least regulated. In LatAm, fintech is definitely needed, the first wave. And after that, you will see a lot more e-commerce enablement and SMB tech kind of investments that will happen next. The SMB tech can be in e-commerce, could be in construction, could be education, empowering more content creators and teachers, be able to sell better. So we want to see a lot more commerce happen in LatAm in a way beyond just Mercado Libre physical goods, because there's just going to be a lot more efficiency that will be affected because of that. And so that's the exciting part. So fintech is definitely fantastic, and we have a lot of investments in fintech, at least with me on the personal basis. But in the next wave, we're also looking at a lot of e-commerce activities as well.
Paulo Chargadobrovsky of eBanks. Where is Paulo? Paulo had a question. Paulo.
Thanks a lot for being here. And you mentioned about the pandemic. When we talk about LatAm, we always talk about promoting inclusion, but we haven't seen that much disruption if we take the last 50 years when we talk about banking. And I think with the pandemic, people are stuck at home and they just have cash. They cannot pay with cash, so they need to find some other alternatives. So a lot of other companies was trying to disrupt and provide different opportunities for those customers in Brazil and Latam. Do you see that now we are taking to a totally different level now that we're gonna see a lot of more disruption? And related to that as well, in Asia in the past, and it's still happening now, you see a lot of companies that they are not in fintech, they're not in payments, but they ended up emerging because the fintech either they don't solve their problem, or they are looking for different revenue streams. So you see Alibaba with Alipay, Grab, and now we start seeing that also in LatAm with Rappi, opening Rappi Bank. You see this trend accelerating and catching up to Asia, or you think it's going to take a long time?
When we look at examples in consumer space, it's a lot easier to draw a comparison to Alipay and to WeChat Pay, and you see wallet being formed. So in Southeast Asia, we're investing in Grab as well, and Grab's going public. We're very friendly with C. I'm a personal investor in C. You see CPay growing. So in LatAm, it's very easy and strategically important for someone like Rappi and iFood to leverage the high frequency of grocery purchase or ride sharing, food delivery in order to expand a wallet. The challenge is that service is great for the top 20-30% of the pyramid. The question is what service can provide to the bottom 70%. And that's the one that needs support a lot more, and it takes more time to monetize. So we're now seeing more startups trying to start with the B2B services, B2B enablement, because everybody is, the sellers have the needs when they want to get paid sooner. And then when they have to pay their own suppliers, they want to figure out a way to do that much more efficiently. So buy now, pay later is happening on the consumer base. We'll also see buy now, pay later happening on the B2B side as well. I remember talking to Max Levchin in 2018 when we made that investment. The valuation of the firm is 1.6 billion. Today is, even with today's correction, it's still about 37, 38 billion. So you see that buy now, pay later is working very well on the consumer side in the US. But we think that what will happen is B2B potentially is an even bigger market, because we need to have capital cycle very quickly within the ecosystem to generate efficiency. So if money transactions are already done, money is not paid until a month later, 2 months later, or it takes a long time to get collected, then the efficiency is not there. You want to get paid as much as possible, quickly, instantaneously, or even in advance, so that they can use that as working capital to the next transactions. So having transactions happen and get settled much quicker sooner is inevitable to generate efficiency. So for that middle part of the 50%, as the next goal, we will see a lot more companies treating the SMB players inside that middle part of the 50% to do that more efficiently. And a lot of people don't know this. In China, Alibaba.com started before Taobao, before Tmall consumer play happened. And that helped to get that initial base of people who have money from exporting in order to have the income to participate as consumer. So you gotta have both. So in Latin, it will take a little longer until there's a lot more manufacturing jobs that go to Latin. So one of the things that I think the government in Latin can do is actively cultivate and get more people who are leaving China to have that supply chain come to Latin. I was born as a Taiwanese, and I came to the U.S. as the first ownership immigrant. But when I was in Taiwan, and also when I went back to Asia to work, I see Taiwan spend a lot of time cultivating that manufacturing job base. Eventually, a lot of it went to China. But in that process, you see that a lot of Chinese government officials actively recruit manufacturers in all throughout Asia to move their operation to China and get tax incentives to do manufacturing in China. So I think the single most important thing that the Latin countries can focus on is do that, while make sure regulation is friendly to tech startups. You need to have both in order to grow, and not one after the other. If one after the other will take more time. If both can happen at the same time, it will expedite what will happen for Latin in the next 10 years.
I would love to invite anyone that has a question for Hans. And Pedro, please say your name. Where's the mic? Thank you, Alexandre. Say your name and company.
Yeah, Pedro, good seeing you again.
Yeah.
My question to you is, when you're thinking about cross-border venture investing, what's your take on currency hedging, given the fluctuations and everything, as it comes to even underwriting a single investment as well as a fund performance?
Yeah. When we first started investing in Latin, that's a question we get from our LPs a lot. In the past,
Same here, that's why I'm asking.
That's right. Many LPs said we lost a lot of money in Latin. And so why are you doing that? Because whatever gain you get from investing in the company, the currency will take it away. There's definitely some truth in that if you're making private equity investments where the upside is more limited and you're going to spend a lot more time doing financial engineering, have control of the operations, have a huge ownership in order to manage the exits better. The alternative way, and where we started working in Asia, was the fact that if you invest in startup early, it ends up being a 20, 30, 40, 50x kind of outcome. Then, of course, even if the currency dropped to 1/3 or 1/4 of what it used to be, you can still make good money. It is a riskier proposition, it's less proven, but it's something that we believe has to be the way, because if there are more tech startups and they're generating more efficiency in the economy, hopefully that'll help to stabilize foreign currency as well. So the honest truth is that we cannot hedge our investments in LatAm. We can only hedge by investing in multiple emerging markets and try to invest earlier and invest in trends that we know extremely well, and leveraging what we learned from other markets to share best practices within the same thesis, within the same category, same sector, so that the companies we invest in can grow faster and therefore overcome the issue of foreign currency based on growth rather than through hedging.
Oh, Howard Chow. Hello, Howard.
Hi, Margarise.
Say your name and company.
I'm Howard Chow, former corporate lawyer, now a tech investor. Hans, good to see you.
As always.
My question to Hans is this. I know that GGV is very strong, not only here, but also in China, obviously. You've done a lot of really great deals there. And there's a lot of business between China and LatAm, right? So what synergies have you seen between your practice in China and in LatAm? And how do you see that playing out given the geopolitical tensions that are happening globally?
Back in 2018, I took a trip to DC. It was in January. I was invited to speak about tech in Asia, specifically China. And from that trip, you can just tell the world has changed dramatically. And DC, by far, has a very different attitude towards what had been a 30, 40 year of sort of engagement sort of policy towards China. So we know the world's changing and we need to adapt as well. For GGV, all 5 of our owners are Singaporeans or US citizens. Myself and 2 other American colleagues here are US citizens. And we have 2 other colleagues who are owners of the firm who are from Singapore originally. And all of our money and the US dollar funds come outside of China. So, and our roots are here and in Singapore. So we have historically been able to navigate through different regions by being a global investor and try to be as sort of neutral as possible, but try to add value from sharing knowledge. And what we saw with LatAm is that, well, Didi and Alibaba and Tencent are making some strategic investments in LatAm. What is even more useful for LatAm was that the founders increasingly are learning a lot from lessons globally. In 2015 and 16, Monashi is one of the top VCs, probably the best in doing early stage tech investments in Brazil, ended up going to China and took multiple trips to see what was the market like and what are lessons they can draw from it. And for example, we created a deck on Pinduoduo, what Pinduoduo is all about from China, what is social commerce, what's Group Buy. And we have founders from LatAm, including Diego from Facility in Brazil, ex-Facebook head of LatAm, saying that, hey, that was great, useful to validate that that's the model you should go after. So what we're seeing is that beyond the sort of money and sort of the strategic cooperation or whatever just the sharing of knowledge from China or anywhere else is something that our LatAm founders learn extremely quickly. And we're seeing that India, because all the money has gone to India to create these unicorns, what India experiences is very valuable for LatAm founders as well. So beyond the sort of money and the geopolitical stuff, the sharing of knowledge and ideas and experience and data points actually ends up being the most valuable. This is why we'll produce the next billion podcasts and other content. And we just reached our 1 million downloads over the last 3 years in doing our podcast, and what people get to know us is through the content we create. And so it's just really interesting to see people learn and exchange ideas at such a more rapid pace than ever before. So regardless of what happens geopolitically, the sharing of knowledge and the sharing of ideas, the sharing of data points, I think is probably the single most important thing in what we're dealing with, and that's what gets me excited.
Seka, do you have a question? Or Julie? Julie.
Hi. Hi. You wanna go
After
first?
Julie, after Julie.
You go first.
First of all, Margarise, thank you so much for convening us. This feels really good. Hi Hans, I'm Julie Ruvula with the Global Private Capital Association in LAFCA. It seems like maybe 5 years ago, investors, VCs stayed much more in their lanes geographically, and maybe a take from the PE model of having geographic allocations and thinking that way. And the firms that were investing across the board were kind of renegade outliers. Now I look at, SoftBank came to LatAm 4 years ago, now they're in Turkey, and Andreessen's in India and Indonesia. It's just everybody's all over the place. So just curious how you guys look at geography now. Is it less relevant, or are you just looking at it differently?
Up until maybe, like you said, 5 years ago, pretty much all the LPs allocate based on geography, even from the best deals locally. And when everybody's growing, that's definitely the right way to do it. But what we start seeing is that some of the bigger trends, whether it's ride sharing, food delivery, or social commerce, becomes such a major force in that local economy that the lessons from one country can be easily shared to other countries, other regions, looking at the same thing. So that even if someone invests in a local company early, but because the sector that the company is in has already somebody else who is 10, 20 times bigger, then as a founder, you want to have someone who have that knowledge to help them by sharing that, or at least have the validation that what they're doing makes sense. So it's very interesting to see the founders who want to have both local money on the cap table as well as international money or global money that validate that that this thesis makes sense and that they're the category leader in that. And so increasingly, we do see sort of blurring of geo lines. And when I joined GGV in 2013, it was with exactly that vision in mind. Because when I see some of our LPs in historical investments in PE, even in US, in real estate, I look at the return. It was like, there's got to be a better way to generate more return, but without taking a lot more risk. If you invest only on a region or invest only on a sector rotates out of favor from time to time. 10 years ago, it was consumer, now it's enterprise. The things change. So instead of finding the next best investor for that particular category in a particular region, it's actually safer, at least I would like to think so, when you have a bigger AUM and you look at across what's happening within tech globally and pick the best thesis with the best founders in the best regions and put money in them. I can't say whether any one region will have volatility or how well they do, but as a portfolio for LP, you're all in on tech, diversify across geography and sector and stage, you can make very arguably say 3-4x and even put more money to work. That's not an issue. My big challenge today is that we don't have enough money, even though we have $2.5 billion, because we've seen great opportunities in all the 5 regions that we're in, and it's hard to choose. And the things we don't end up investing still do well. The things that we invest, we hope to do even better, but all in all, 3-4x consistently over a large AUM is not going to be an issue. I remember when Tiger Global came to talk to me about doing something with them in China. I met Scott, I met Chase. I was very impressed with the way they think about things. They don't do as much operational support like an Andreessen or like we do, but they're very thoughtful at where they want to go, very strategically see the trends across geographies. And that's kind of how I think about the lessons I learned from Asia, how applicable it is elsewhere. And it's like kind of like finding kindred spirit. Obviously they had scaled their organization extremely well and they've done very well. But I think that marrying that with operational support, more data sharing across founders, across geographies is an easier way to make investments and arguably a safer way as well.
Thank you. And Seka, your question, and I'm sorry, it has to be the last question.
Thank you so much. Hans, always really appreciate your insights. Amazing experience. So I'm Carlos Cochran, Qualcomm Ventures. Been investing in the region for 20 years. Never in my wildest dreams I thought we'd see a market like this in the region. I just came back from a 2-week trip in Brazil and seeing what's going on, talking to a lot of VC firms, etc. And I think a lot of people basically said we didn't see this coming, etc. Right? We're seeing globally the acceleration of venture capital here in the U.S., etc. We're having to move really fast on deals. My question's, despite all your positivity, is there anything that keeps you up at night? Anything that says, okay, this, at one point could go wrong. Just whether you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, many things can go wrong, you know. Geopolitically, always the risk for war has never been higher over the last few decades. And also, you look at the valuation that funds are paying on enterprise startups is over 100x, on 150x revenue multiple. That is definitely not sustainable. But I think that what I take from that is the underlying growth. You look at sort of traditional media versus social media. 8 years ago, when I first came back to the US, a lot of people talk about how it would take a while for digital media to be as relevant. Now, it's digital media is bigger than offline media. You look at e-commerce, Amazon and Walmart are going to be going at it for a while, but you see that Amazon just came out, out-compete as being a digital-first company. In e-commerce in the US, the penetration rate against retail is in the mid-teens, 15%. In China is low 20s. And how much bigger can that get? Can e-commerce be 50% of retail? And now we're seeing, because of COVID, out of sector, digital penetration is showing up in single digit, moving from single digit to low teens. So when that happens, we may see disruption valuation correction. That definitely will happen. This is for sure. But even if when that does happen, it doesn't change the fact that digital penetration will continue to happen in every sector one by one. And the speed of which could be different, there's undeniable what's happening. Today in the US, it's hard to get goods being shipped to everyone, and we have a much longer wait than before. Partially because the supply chain is disrupted, partially because a lot of goods get stuck in the warehousing ports, and due to lack of automation in those ports, due to union labor and other issues, some of the gripes are legitimate, but the reality is that because the ports are not automated, we cannot catch up and have a lot of things get stuck there. Over time, automation will play a bigger role in society, whether we like it or not, and things will get more efficient. And the regions that don't do that will get left behind, and more that people travel, compare, and read the content, and realize that, hey, this is not right, we gotta fix it. India changed a lot in 2016, 2017 because of UPI, because of 4G Geo, because GST. And UPI single-handedly made it possible to do mobile payment through the bank's existing layer of infrastructure in a way that was not possible before. Then when that happened, you see Brazil changing. You see countries in LatAm adapting as well. So when you see things like that happen, it just either you're part of that tech evolution or you're not. And the ones that get left behind will get talked about a lot on Twitter, on social media, and so forth. So it puts a lot of pressure on every government to evolve accordingly as well, or you see people moving to places that's happening. So because of that, yes, you're always going to be worried about valuation when things get too hot. But even when that does happen, it doesn't change the fact that the underlying growth and digitalization is happening continually.
Thank you.
Hans, to wrap up, I would like to know a little bit about your own life. Being the first generation Taiwanese, now you are such a big deal. Tell us about your journey. What did inspire you to become an investor?
Oh, I knew I was not a good founder, so being an investor is a lot easier. My first job out of Stanford was in investment banking, and I know from working on Wall Street for 2 years in New York that I'm just not as motivated by financial engineering. It's the colleagues were much smarter than me and they do much better at it. But the part of the job that was interesting to me was seeing how, when we have on sell-side assignments, see companies are selling, whether it's in Vermont or Missouri, because it was hard to compete against competitors from Asia. They can't compete on price, so everybody's selling it. So even a hollowing effect, I saw that in 93, 94 in the US, in different parts of the US already. And then going with Wall Street firms to go to Asia and see how Asia had the manufacturing coming up from PC to feature phones to semiconductor chips, and see how these things emerge and impact global supply chain, feeds into the consumer growth in the US. Just seeing this, how these countries compete based on competitive nations in the entire value chain, and see these values shift from one region to the other was fascinating to me. And then I was curious in my lifetime, what big country like China or India develop? And just so happened that China did during my lifetime, and India's on the way up as well. And you see these millions of young, smart, hungry young people learn how to code and learn how to sell and being very active online. I remember going to places in Bangalore, New Delhi, in startups at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and there's a lot of people there. And going, I remember visiting Xiaomi to see Beijing at 1 o'clock in the morning, a lot of people there. And they're just so driven on making a difference and creating changes. When I go to Sao Paulo or I go to Mexico City or Bogota, I see young founders and teams very driven because they feel like they've been behind. There's an opportunity to catch up. That energy, that ambition, that drive, that wanting to do something for themselves, for their team, for the society, is what makes me so happy to do what I do.
What a wonderful note to wrap up. Obrigada. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you.
Hans Tung, Managing Partner of the GGV Capital.